Hello, welcome back to the show today. Today I want to share some thoughts with you on having less fear. I know there's a percentage of you who don't fear anything at all, but the rest of us, from time to time, struggle with fear. And fear looks like a lot of different things to different people. It could be applying for a new career. It could be asking someone out on a date. It could be having a conversation that is not very pleasant to have. I know you've probably had those conversations that at the end of the conversation, you're glad it's over. But before the conversation, oh my God, it's like you really don't want to have it. So that's kind of the big picture here today. So I'm hoping in the next 25 minutes or so that you will maybe look at fear a little differently or maybe understand that on the other side of fear, many times is freedom. That is that you can do things that you didn't think you could do before. So let's kind of jump into this fear subject today. I've seen in my own life, and I've seen a lot of other people's lives too, that fear stands in the way of really going for it. I can remember when I started in business, I really did not think that I could accomplish certain things. And I felt that I couldn't do very well on TV. You know, I thought that maybe it was for the other person who could speak better or had lots more experience, or maybe they had family in the business. I don't know. I didn't think I was qualified. And some watching this probably think I'm still not qualified, and that's okay, no problem. But fear really gets in the way of you and I doing some things that can be very extraordinary in our lives. And you know, you want something really bad, and fear gets in the way, and it's kind of like a guy that's standing, you know, at a construction zone with a stop sign that says you can't go any farther. I know you've been in backups before, or construction sites when people stand on the side of the road with a sign up and there's a barrage of cars waiting for the other cars to pass, but this guy's got that sign and he says stop, so you have to stop. That's kind of like what fear does to you and I. When we attempt great things, it seems like there's somebody there with that sign that says stop. Fear has a way of making what you want look so scary that you cannot imagine getting past that fear. I'll tell you a quick little embarrassing story. Back in 1987, I started working for a department store called Caldor, C-A-L-D-O-R. And they're from the Northeast, at least back then. And they had a store in Westminster, Maryland, in this mall. And you figure 1987, I just almost turned 18 years old. No, I take that back. I was about 20 years old, pardon me, about 20 years old. So they brought this young lady down that was going to be my part-time night help. We had the area of the store I was in charge of was with cameras and film and processing pictures and stuff like that back in the dark ages. It seems so long ago. So I liked the way this girl looked. I was like, you know, she was about a year and a half, 2 years younger than me. And I was terrified to ask her out, because at the time I stuttered really, really bad, way worse than I do now. I was like scared to death to even attempt to ask her out. So one day, maybe 2 months into her working there, I got the courage up and I sounded so stupid. I says, would anybody mind if we went out to dinner on our lunch, on our break? Would anybody mind? Where'd that come from? The point being is I was so scared to ask her out, it just kind of fumbled out of my mouth because of fear. Well, she said yes, and less than a year later, we got married, and we've been married now, as of this taping, 29 years. I'm so glad I overcame fear and asked this girl out, even though it was a stupid way to ask somebody out. I don't recommend you do it the way I do it, for sure. Chip Richards shares a story that he originally shared back in 2010. He said this, he says, we lived near a beach a few years ago, and where our daily rhythms were woven into the lives of a local pod of dolphins, he says. Every day for about 6 months, they met us in the waves, and each day their behavior seem to reflect our thoughts in profound ways, often revealing to us some deeper truth or lesson about life. One day, when I had something heavy weighing on my mind and was feeling fearful about a certain aspect of my life, I went out surfing to find some peace. I caught a few waves, and the pod arrived. So I followed them, paddling for about 20 minutes into the open blue ocean. At first, I felt much better. How could you not, hanging out with these guys? But eventually, my thoughts circled back to fears about the problems I was having. And as soon as I did, the dolphins disappeared, gone as if on cue. Glancing back to a thin strip of sand in the distance, I realized for the first time how far out to sea my so-called friends had brought me. Way far out to sea, he said. Then suddenly I noticed something else. A large, dark shadow hovering underneath my surfboard. I held my breath. This was way bigger than a dolphin, and to my knowledge could only mean one thing. My dolphin friends had brought me way out here to be eaten by, yes, a shark. Every cell in my body recoiled, and I lay frozen on my board, waiting for the shadow beneath me to move. So he was scared out of his mind. So he was waiting for it to circle and to eventually chew him up and swallow him. But strangely, it just stayed there. My fear was at its peak. Finally, after what seemed like minutes, I lost patience for death to find me, so I stuck my head under the water to see what was going on. There, I saw an amazing thing. What I had thought to be a large, hungry shark was actually, listen, a cluster of 3 dolphins gliding close in unison right underneath me. The water had magnified and distorted their image. Again, the water had magnified and distorted their image, melding my most treasured allies into a vision of my greatest fear. And the amazing thing was that this happened right at the very moment that I had been indulging my mind with fears and worries about my life. It was as if their external actions were simply, listen, reflecting my inner landscape. What I discovered here in the water, and have found to be true in life ever since, listen, is that when we trust enough to look beyond the surface of even our greatest fears, more often than not, we discover that the absolute opposite is true. Oftentimes, you and I realize that we're just on the verge of greatness when we are terrified to take the next step. The story ends with, consider an aspect of your life and your potential that brings up feelings of fear in you. Something that causes you to freeze or lock down in some way in your life. Take some time, he says, to connect with what it is that you fear the most in that situation. Then ask yourself, what if the opposite were true? What would the opposite of your worst fear look like? Perhaps it was waiting there just below the surface, ready to guide you home. I can remember back, I think in the beginning of 2016, our daughter Juliana was struggling with cancer again. And she tells the story of how she was afraid to have a needle in her back to do a bone marrow biopsy. Let me share her words right now in this show.
Hi everyone, it's Juliana at Carver. I just wanted to update you on how today went. We got home a few hours ago from the biopsy. I just wanted to tell you how it went. Behind the scenes, I guess. So, all this week I've been worrying about it because they've been saying that I was going to get local anesthesia instead of regular. So they were going to keep me awake for it. And I was like, I don't want to be awake because then I'll be feeling it and stuff. And they're like, no, they'll give you a needle and numb it. I'm like, but I'll feel the needle. And I've been worrying about that the entire time. And then when it finally came to that, it was just a little poke. And then I was like, did I really worry this whole week about a little prick? And then that's what annoys me so much, my do these kind of things. I always get myself all worked up about the little things, and then it doesn't hurt as bad. So I always tell myself I worry about nothing. So that was pretty much it. Bye.
So you see, fear is the foundation of most people not reaching their best in life. As you saw in Juliana's little story, she was afraid of something that after she went through it, it wasn't a big deal at all. You and I have to maybe somehow read about people. I think, at least in my world, I read a lot of books. So I've learned the hard way through the journeys of other people that they've also struggled to overcome stuff. So if they can overcome stuff, then you and I can overcome stuff too. A great philosopher by the name of Bronson Alcott, lived well over 100 years ago, wrote, "To be ignorant of one's ignorance," listen, "to be ignorant of one's ignorance is the malady of the ignorant." And that's what are you saying, John? To be ignorant of one's ignorance is the malady of the ignorant. Another way to say it is there are some people who don't know that they don't know. When you and I realize that we struggle with fear, then we can find ways to overcome the fear. We can find those shortcuts. We can find people in our lives to give us that courage to keep moving forward. So many times people build their lives on foundations that are not proven. They're not solid. In fact, I would go as far as saying there are some people who build their lives on the negative opinions of other people. That is, people who said, well, you can't do it, whatever the it is, because I haven't done it, or you're not smart enough, or you don't have the college degree, or you've gone through so much in your life that you can't possibly overcome whatever struggle that you're going through. Their opinions put fear in your mind and your heart that stop you from doing things that I think you were, frankly, designed to do. Let me share another story. In 1174 AD, an Italian architect by the name of Bonanno Pisano began work on what would become his most famous project, a separately standing bell tower for the cathedral of the city of Pisa. The tower was to be 8 stories high. That's 185 feet. So it wasn't a small project that he was working on at all. There was just one little problem. The builders quickly discovered that the soil was much softer than they had anticipated, and the foundation was far too shallow to adequately hold the structure. And sure enough, before long, the whole structure had begun to tilt, and it continued to tilt. Until finally, the architect and the builders realized that nothing could be done to make the Leaning Tower of Pisa straight again. It took 176 years, listen, it took 176 years to build the Tower of Pisa, and during that time, many things were done to try to compensate for the tilt. The foundation was shored up. The upper levels were even built at an angle to try to make the top of the tower look straight. Nothing worked. The tower has stood for over 800 years, but there's definitely some problems that remain. Not too long ago, after having closed for almost a dozen years, the Leaning Tower of Pisa was finally reopened to the public. During that 12-year closure, engineers completed a $25 million renovation to stabilize the tower. They removed 110 tons of dirt and reduced its famous lean by about 16 inches. Why was that necessary? Because the tower has been tilting further and further away from the vertical for hundreds of years, to the point that the top of the tower was 17 feet, listen, the top of the tower was 17 feet further south, 17 feet was further south than the bottom. And the Italian authorities were concerned that if nothing was done, it would soon collapse. Something had to be done, and quickly. What was the problem? Was it bad? Was it a bad design? Poor workmanship? Was it an inferior grade of marble? No is the answer to all those questions. The problem was what was underneath. The sandy soil in which the city of Pisa was built was not stable, not even a little bit, to support that huge monument. The problem all stemmed from the foundation. Now, if you stop and pause just a minute, There is a foundation of fear that must be discovered and overtaken. Again, there's a foundation of fear that must be discovered and overtaken. The past, your past, my past, can be a foundation of fear. Sometimes how we frame a situation of our past can sometimes enable us to overtake situations in the present, both in a good way and also in a bad way. I think living in fear is like building your house on sand, which is not a good idea. It's kind of like that Tower of Pisa. It's tilted. It's still tilted to this day because they didn't take into consideration the foundation in which it was built. So stop and just pause a second here and think about your life and how your life is built and how you've built it and how you've allowed other people to impact the construction of your life, how you can get farther faster if you maybe redesign the foundation of your life. And that's, to be very brutally blunt, reframing how you think from day to day. Fear has held me back so many times. In fact, I've probably wasted a good 20 years, maybe more of my life in my own world, in my own lifestyle, because of fear. It's held me back from doing extraordinary things because I didn't think that I could accomplish it, or people would look at me in a certain way or a certain light, or they would assume that my motivation is this instead of that. I wonder how many times in your own life haven't you taken or chosen to take the steps forward because the foundation of the choices that you're making are based out of fear and not based out of love or your own heart. Somebody once said, I can't remember the name of the person, it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we're powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant or gorgeous or talented or fabulous? Actually, who you are, this text says a child of God. You're playing small, it says, doesn't serve the world. It says we're all meant to shine as children do. We're born to manifest the glory of God that's within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. The quote goes on to talk about a few more things. So what I'm saying is that, like I've said and will say a few more times, is that on the other side of fear, there can be some really cool things that happen if you just get past that. Maybe it's not a speed bump, maybe it's a mountain of fear. Because fear, one ancient text says that fear has torment. Fear has a way of stopping you before you even get started. I'll say it again. Fear has a way of stopping you before you even get started. Your deepest fear is that maybe you might not reach for what you're striving for. Well, I can almost encourage you and convince you, maybe is a better way to say it, is that you're going to fall on your face multiple times. So if your fear is that you're going to fail, I guarantee you're going to fail. Because failing is part of the process of getting really good at stuff. I'm embarrassed to tell you that I didn't know that for a long time. I'll say it again, that failure and failing is part of the process of you getting where you want to get. So if you're afraid that you're going to fail in the process of doing something great, take that off the table because you're going to fail, you're going to fall, you're going to make mistakes in the process. That's how you get to where you need to be. I don't know of too many people, if any, have reached some level of success without falling on their face multiple times. There may be, you might know some people who have done that, but not very many people that I know have made it the first time or second or third or fourth time without falling on their face. It's very interesting to me that fear, it appears in all of our emotions. In fact, our brain, it seems, at least from my reading, it devotes a large sum of space to that energy of fear. So can you become less fearful? Again, can you become less fearful? I would say that the answer is probably yes, if you do what you fear more consistently. Let me say it again. You can overcome fear, I think, much more quickly if you do what you fear more consistently. And that might be speaking in public, that might be taking classes, that might be talking to people that you don't know. It could be taking on projects at work that you've never done before, but you're afraid to take them on because you've never done it before. So that means that if you haven't done them before in your own mind, means that you can't accomplish it or do very well at it. I mean, it's kind of a mind game you need to play with yourself in order to see past fear. Because when you see past fear and take the steps past fear, then you can really do some really cool, extraordinary things in your own life. So can you become fearless? Fearlessness, I think, is about getting up another time every time you fall down. Every time you get back on your feet when you don't think that you could get back up on your feet again. The more comfortable we are, it seems, with the process of falling down, the less worried you are about what people will think about it. I mean, I would venture to say that the people that are most critical of you don't want you to know that they've fallen on their face multiple times. They think they're like Mary Poppins, practically perfect in every way. That's just not reality. Again, I'll say it a few times, that I don't know too many people, if any, that have just had their stuff together and they never made mistakes in the process. This concept can change the way you move forward dramatically. Because when you understand that falling is part of walking, which is part of running, which is part of winning races, then being afraid and or doing things that you haven't done before, you understand that that's part of the game. I mean, if you were new to playing basketball and you've never, shot a hoop, you're going to miss every single time for a period of time until you get good at it. That's the nature of the beast. That's how it works. But if you understand that you have to keep shooting the ball and maneuvering and adjusting and correcting and practicing over and over again, if you really want to get good at whatever you're trying to get good at. And all I'm saying here today is that if you want to overcome fear, then you have to do the stuff that you're fearful of more often. And then, at least in my case, you're going to find that the stuff that you were once afraid of doing, now it's not, you don't even think about it anymore, because it's like brushing your teeth and taking a shower. It's what you do, and it's easy, and you're not fearful anymore because you've done it so many times. So fear now is non-existent in your life because you've looked at it in the face and you've moved forward. You've done the scary stuff until the scary stuff is not scary stuff anymore. Does it make any sense? So without a proper foundation, your foundation's going to crack. Again, without a proper foundation, your foundation is going to crack. And if you watch those home improvement shows, from time to time, they're going to have scenes on there where people have bought these houses and they pull the carpet up and the foundation's all cracked. So they obviously have to re-pour the foundation. They can't build or do any improvements on a foundation that's cracked. And I would suggest that's the same with you and I. That if we try to build structures or build a life or create something in our own world, when our foundation's cracked, then we're not going to get very far very, very fast. In fact, there's an acrostic, what fear stands for, F-E-A-R. False evidence appearing real. Again, false evidence appearing real. Without a proper foundation, your foundation's going to crack. That's just what it is. So if you want to find ways to overcome fear, somebody told me, or told a group of us a long time ago, that sometimes you need to face the facts. And maybe you need to write down, at least in your own life, what the facts are that you're trying to overcome. Or maybe what goals you're trying to achieve and put them in writing. In fact, I know of one person that would write down, what's the worst thing that could possibly happen if I attempt this? The worst thing. So he listed the worst things, which weren't too many, because not a whole lot's negative things are going to happen. And then on the other side of the sheet of paper, he wrote down all the good things that could happen if he was able to push past the fear of this task that he was trying to accomplish. Because our feelings change all the time, but the facts don't change. So if you write a list of the facts and write a list of the reasons, things that could go wrong, but then list all the things that could go right, and as a result of you pushing through the fear, You're going to find more times than not that the things that are going to do well as a result of you pushing through the fear are a much, much better risk for you to take if you really want to overcome fear. Again, fear stands for false evidence appearing real. In fact, the actress Whoopi Goldberg, I was told, I read somewhere, that she had a terrible fear of flying that kept her off planes for about 13 years. But when she accepted a job as a talk show host for The View, she decided to face her fear and step aboard a commercial airline. And facing her fears head on, now she doesn't even think too much about it. Again, fear, false evidence appearing real. Mark Twain once quipped, listen, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not absence of fear. Again, courage is resistance to fear, mastery of fear, not the absence of fear. Rhonda Britton shares, fear has a job to do. It wants to keep you safe. Wisdom has a job to do. It wants you to expand. The voice of fear, listen, the voice of fear will always make you feel bad about yourself. Fear has tons of evidence to show you why you shouldn't do it or why you shouldn't step up. So I guarantee that when you face fear in the face, it'll back down every single time. So I encourage you that if you want to be fearless, then face fear today and tomorrow and the next day. And you're going to find that stuff that scared the stuff out of you before, it doesn't even bother you anymore. My name is John Carver, and I appreciate you watching the show today. Thanks.